Thank you for your comments. What do we have next, Ms. Lacey?
Next is the person with the screen name Judy's iPad, who should be able to unmute.
Hello, my name is Judy Fulford. I lived in the old Northeast neighborhood from 1980 to 2016, 36 years at 8th and Dunn Street. My former coworkers would smirk when I told people where I lived. I didn't get it. What I did get, that there was a price to pay. That price was not being able to have your windows open in the spring and fall because of random screams in the middle of the night. My daughter, who is 30 now, says that if you could sleep at our home on 8th Street, you could sleep anywhere due to noisy neighbors at nights. Maybe that's a benefit. While duplexes don't mean trash and noisy neighbors, core neighborhoods' proximity to IU make it likely that the occupants of duplexes will be students. The location and costs make that very likely. I know what that is like, 36 years worth. I am all for affordable housing, housing for the missing middle, but I'm not convinced this is the best path to get there. After I moved from the old Northeast neighborhood, I moved to Elm Heights. I was happy to find a good balance of students, older adults, and families. I am keenly aware of what balance and lack of balance in a neighborhood feel like. Duplexes could tip the balance for me. I was visiting my daughter in Philadelphia last week. In her neighborhood, there were older homes and duplexes. The duplexes fit in very well with the architectural style of the neighborhood. They did not stick out like a sore thumb. I know we have zoning requirements, but I feel they are way too weak if plexes are approved in blending new architecture of duplexes into our oldest neighborhoods. Our oldest neighborhoods are one of the things that make Bloomington such a special place for me. Please vote yes to the amendment. It is not because I do not like plexes. It is because I feel like we need to preserve our core neighborhoods. They are worth preserving. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Who do we have next, Ms. Lacey?
Sorry. Next is Kathleen Myers, who should be able to unmute.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk. I am speaking because I strongly support Amendment 1. There's many things I'd like to say, but I'll stick with just what came up last week at the meeting. Last week, Ms. Scallion responded to a question about how many properties could be affected by this duplex experiment. And she said she didn't really know, nor could she accurately guess. Maybe 20, maybe less. The city didn't know. I asked council members, what if in fact this free market experiment has terrible consequences for affordable housing and neighborhoods? How many more divisive meetings and years would it take to revisit this decision, to reverse it, to attempt to undo the harm? Why not start with more consensus, local research, and a smaller experiment? All scientists know that you first pilot a study before launching it full on. Why would people's neighborhoods, assets, and community be any different? You have been elected to make good decisions on our behalf. Sorry, I gotta get to my second page here. Is justice being served to push this through now with not a single in-person meeting during the worst global pandemic in a century? Does this process honor Bloomington citizens and neighborhoods? It is easier to shut out the reality of the majority of the citizens when you only have to confront our names on a screen, not even a face. But is this doing justice for all? Please vote for Amendment 1 and know that simply pulling out yet another amendment for conditional use that is flip-flopped back and forth does not address any of the serious flaws with this zoning experiment. Let's take the time and work together for true affordable housing that's not an experiment with our, I'm sorry, I'm done. That's the end of time. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ms. Myers, for your comments. What do you have next, Ms. Lesa?
Councilmember Sims, I'm sorry, Councilmember Volin.
Point of order, Mr. President. Could we explain, could we have Ms. Lacey explain that raising of the hand does not mean that time is up, that it's when she does a T?
Right. And in fact, Ms. Myers has another about 45 seconds on her 3 minutes. So when I raise my hand like this, there's 1 minute remaining on the clock. And when I go like this, the 3 minute time period has expired.
Ms. Myers, did you catch all of that?
Let me just say thank you very much for allowing me my 45 seconds. I pass the baton, but I do ask the council to seriously consider what I have said. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for your comments. Before we go forward, we'll just remind all public commenters that you'll be allowed 3 minutes to speak. You can indicate your intent to speak by using the raised hand function in Zoom, or send our meeting host a note on chat so you could be recognized. I'll ask if you have more than one person on any device, please let us know that. If you intend to publicly comment so we can acknowledge you. And as Ms. Lacey just explained, if you're looking at her screen picture, when she puts her hand up like so, as you see it, that means you have about 30 seconds left. When she does like the T or the time, then that means your time is up, and I will ask you to cease. So, okay, Miss Lacey, who do we have next?
Next is Eric Sater, who should be able to unmute.
Yeah, good evening, council members. As many of you know, I've worked in affordable housing for a number of years now. For me, the question is relatively simple in that we're asking ourselves, in a growing city, does it make sense to allow the potential opportunity for an incremental increase in density in the core of a city? And for me, the answer is yes. There are a whole lot of other questions and a whole lot of other policies that need to be addressed. But in terms of a structural question, that's something that to me makes sense. One thing I'd point you to is something called an H&T index, which is housing and transportation. Just remembering that housing is more than a rent cost. It's more than a mortgage cost. It looks at things like, let's say, having a shared wall will decrease your utilities. Questions like, when you have transportation, what is not only the economic cost of that, but the opportunity cost of the time you spend in transit? So please just look comprehensively when we're considering these housing costs. I can't tell you exactly what will happen, nor can anyone, when we make any sort of change. I can tell you, however, what will happen if we don't. And it's pretty clear, whether you look at historic preservation or otherwise, that if you don't allow a neighborhood to change, the costs in that neighborhood absolutely go up. And is it a good neighborhood to live in? Yeah, absolutely, it could be. But that's not really what I'm hearing discussed here. I'm hearing affordability discussed. And affordability will not be aided if we don't allow changes within these neighborhoods. Last quick point on democracy. Just remember, this is a representative democracy, and representatives also have an obligation to ensure that minority voices are considered when you make your final determinations. So just a couple points to consider, and good luck, everyone. I know this is a complex issue.
Thank you for your comments. Who do we have next, Ms. Lacey?
Next is Judy Berkshire, and the person should be able to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Berkshire. How are you? Go ahead. We have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Judy Berkshire, and I live in the East Side neighborhood at 509 South Rose Avenue. I support Amendment 1, and I hope each of you on the council will support it as well. My reasons for supporting it are simply that it enforces the comprehensive plan that was developed and voted on by many of you on the council in 2019. I supported the language in the comprehensive plan, which encouraged and spoke to the value of core neighborhoods and single-family owner-occupied homes. Frankly, I am a little disappointed and discouraged that this issue is back in front of the council again. I had hoped that by now, you, the Plan Commission, and the government employees charged with carrying out the plan would be working on creative solutions to increase affordable housing, walkability, and greening, not graying the city with more roofs, impervious surfaces, and walls enclosing the open spaces available among the single-family neighborhoods. Please vote in favor of Amendment 1 and start working and thinking creatively to really carry out the comprehensive plan on 2019. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Before we go any further, Ms. Lacey, you can identify who's going to speak next. But I'm getting reports that chat is not functioning properly.
And I apologize for that. It's been intermittent, and
Yes,
we've had
okay.
some challenge with members of the public communicating to the entire group rather than just to me, the meeting host specifically. So if we could ask that the chat be directed toward me, and I apologize. I'll try and watch that the security setting doesn't change.
Okay, thank you. That's reasonable. And I hope everyone heard you. To either respond with the meeting host and refrain from personal chatting with each other. But okay, we'll move on. Who do we have next?
Next, we have a person with the screen name Rachell Dinga. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Who should be able to unmute now.
Hi, I'm Rachell Dinga. Can you guys hear me?
We hear you fine. Thank you, Ms.
Okay.
Dinga. You have about 3 minutes.
I've lived in Bloomington for 13 years, first as a student, then a renter, and now a homeowner. There's no doubt that Bloomington has gotten more expensive, but the question that needs to be asked is where will this middle housing be placed for it to be wholly effective? By allowing upzoning in Bloomington's core neighborhoods, we're allowing out-of-town developers and real estate money dictate what happens in our neighborhoods. Before we allow non-local market forces to take a broad brush to these residential areas in Bloomington with no regard to the neighborhoods themselves, let's consider some things first. Let's create criteria for where this housing would be placed based on distinction of our neighborhoods. Let's consider location, age of neighborhood, layout, access to public transportation, and most importantly, will this actually be affordable for those who are trying to be, for those who we're trying to be more inclusive too? Let neighborhoods, neighborhoods that will potentially be affected by this vote. If we want to truly be inclusive, everyone's voices deserve to be heard. Let's use careful surgical planning because this is a complicated issue. How do we know that applying this broad stroke over residential Bloomington will be effective? We will not know the true outcome until after the fact when it's irreversible. I support Amendment 1, and I hope you all do too. I believe we can do better as a community to create affordable housing. And thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you very much for your comments. Ms. Lacey?
Next, we have a person with the screen name Margaret, who should be able to unmute.
Hello, friends and neighbors. I've been in and around Bloomington since around 1970.
Ms. Margaret, I'm sorry, before you can you identify your full name, please?
My name, yes, could I start over then?
Yes, ma'am, you get your full 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Margaret Clements, and I've been in and around Bloomington since 1979, and I've lived in every housing type. I implore you to approve Amendment 1. In addition to thanking the council members for hearing me tonight, I would also like to thank my fellow community members who have been giving countless hours of their time and devotion in order to research facts that they are entitled to and for which they are also paying. The city is not serving them well. I myself spent over 2 weeks coming up with an inventory of housing and multifamily housing that had been recently built, approved, or under shovel, only to be called and referred to as providing misinformation to my community that I love. As a result of a request to reconcile the data with the city, I have a net gain of 140 more units that weren't on my list that are concerning to us because we see all around us density going up. But nevertheless, in a recent Ask the Mayor episode, Mayor John Hamilton said about the UDO, some of the people who care most about the development ordinance don't live here now. They don't live here yet. We ask council, the mayor, and the planning department to build for us, not some imaginary vision for a city that you won't share with us, a vision for the city that you will not share with us. Bloomington, frankly, is an average town. It has been made better over the years by what James Baldwin would call the love of a very few people. That love, that dedication, that service has culminated into something extraordinary, so much so that this little town in South Central Indiana has become something more than it could have ever been without the intervention of that love. So many people have made a transformative difference in who we are and who we could ever become. They gave of themselves freely, asking nothing in return other than a potential positive impact. That is why I say you must approve all efforts that disallow these one-size-fits-all changes to our beloved city. The current zoning discussions have not been right, fair, correct, justified, or collective. The goodwill in this town that you steward is not yours to squander. It is not for John Hamilton and his appointees to give away. It is not for you to build an imaginary city for imaginary citizens. We demand you serve us. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Clements. Who do we have next, Ms. Lacey?
Next is the screen name NWSNA, who should be able to unmute.
My name is Olivia Dorfman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Ms. Dorfman. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
I live on the near west side. Shortly after I moved here, my neighbors told me the history of this neighborhood. I learned that the people who live here have had to fight again and again to keep uncontrolled development from destroying this wonderful community of modest homes on tiny lots. At one point, the city even wanted to put a highway through it, but people got together and fought to stop it. I remember speaking in front of many of you in 2019 and how thrilled I was when you voted unanimously to designate the Near West Side as a historic conservation district. But not long after that, we saw the UDO and the city's plan to encourage Plex development. We spoke up again, and I was relieved when council voted not to put plexes in the already densely built core neighborhoods. I've lived in many other places before Bloomington, from big cities to rural areas, and I have seen what happens when development is unchecked. In the past 2 years, I've done a lot of research. I learned that blanket upzoning has been a contentious issue in communities around the country, and for good reason. One quote in particular resonates with me. This is from Nora Liu, who is a regional manager for the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. I quote, "Jurisdictions are beginning to understand that upzoning, in order to absorb growth, has unintended consequences. It increases the value of the real estate and therefore increases displacement pressures. In other words, upzoning would likely increase the gentrification of Bloomington. Is this what we want? This was not what the comprehensive plan recommended. Don't let Bloomington hurtle into the future without sensible control on development. I urge you to support Amendment 1 to the UDO update. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Ms. Lacey?
Next, we have Jenny Stevens, who should be able to unmute.
Hello, I'm speaking in support of Amendment 1. My name is Jenny Stevens. I bought my little pink house on the near west side in 2006, and I live across the street from Olivia. My comments will be brief. I stand in agreement with the residents of the core neighborhoods who have eloquently voiced a vast array of arguments in favor of Amendment 1. I ask that you perform your experiments in new places with willing participants. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Stevens. Who do we have next, Ms. Lacey?
Next is Owen Rogers, who should be able to unmute.
Hi, yeah, I'm Owen Rogers. I'm a graduate student at SPIA at IU. I hear a lot of people saying that the only option to build, or that they're not in favor, or that they're in favor of affordable housing, but just not in the core neighborhoods. But the only option is to put those affordable housing duplexes and triplexes in the core neighborhoods just because of how the city is structured. If you look at the map of Bloomington zoning, most of the planned development is outside walking distance from campus, and the majority of people who are going to be renting affordable housing units are students or faculty at IU. And if you are concerned about the character of the town changing, the only other option besides building those units outside of walking distance is to rapidly upzone and build extremely vertically in the areas that are currently zoned for multifamily, for high density housing near campus. And that would almost certainly result in a much bigger change of character than allowing some duplexes and triplexes near, Bryant Park and on the east side of campus. Furthermore, there's a lot of people are concerned about traffic, increased traffic, which again would increase if most of those students were forced out of walking distance from IU. They would have to drive, and that would result in greater parking infrastructure being required near campus, more crowded streets, and so on. And finally, people were concerned that the type of residents in these duplexes and triplexes wouldn't fit with the neighborhood, but they're failing to consider the idea that a lot of young professionals and graduate students who aren't able to purchase their own home yet, but don't want to live near a bunch of rowdy undergrads, which I get, would be also targets for those duplexes and triplexes, and would not result in these horrible, these horror stories that people have of students keeping them up all night. Although it is a college town, and you're going to have to get used to that. That's basically it. I yield my time.
Thank you for your comments. Who do we have next?
Marcia Baron, who should be able to unmute.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Great. I'm Marcia Baron. I live in Elm Heights, and I very strongly support Amendment 1. I want to just deviate from my script to say it's been really moving to hear so many eloquent statements tonight. And I'm at the same time saddened that we've been forced into a situation of having to spend so much time on this. But anyway, let me go ahead and say the things I was about to say. So although what we heard last week and especially today have been predominantly voices supporting the amendment, we also heard some very moving statements from people struggling to afford housing in Bloomington. people who think that the upzoning might help. And I really do agree there is a problem, but the problem is specifically that it's the lack of affordable housing. And let's not let that get mixed up with anything else, like that density is good. So I think that assuming we can agree that the problem is a lack of affordable housing, upzoning is not the solution. I don't know if it is anywhere, but it certainly isn't in Bloomington, where there is a huge and lucrative student rental market. Others have pointed this out. I'll just quickly go over it. It's extremely lucrative to buy a house, a fixer-upper, turn it into duplexes, turn it into a duplex and rent to 6 unrelated people instead of only 3. But those are the very houses that need to be available for people to buy. So we've got this big problem that, especially for buying a house, you're going to make things worse with upzoning. Now, some have said upzoning is not the whole solution, but it is a part of it. No, it is no part of it. It might be if we could require that duplexes be owner occupied, but we can't because of Indiana state law. But an ADU is only permitted for a home that's owner occupied. So some people who were speaking in favor of duplexes last week gave arguments that in fact are good arguments for allowing ADUs. And just regarding the last person, I think who spoke, I think that the ADU addresses that concern. We may need to tweak it somehow. I don't know the details with ADUs, but ADUs should be great at providing, say, grad student housing, for an example. So if our concern really is affordable housing, duplexes will not help. If our aim is actually to provide more business opportunities for developers, then the duplexes would be great, okay? So there's a lot we should be doing to address the problem, no denying that. But upzoning is a distraction. It's not helping, and it's extremely counterproductive. Here, we just got out of the Trump era. We thought we were escaping all this horrible divisiveness and hostility, but our city government had to give us this. Anyway, let's pass Amendment 1. Let's move forward. Then we can have a real discussion, drawing on the expertise in this town, of which there is a lot. People who come to mind include Jim Rosenbarger, Carrie Thompson, Mayor Allison, just to name a few. Instead of foisting on us a simplistic solution as the city has, it needs to invite a genuine open discussion of our options. And there have been a lot of hardworking people working on this. A lot of people
Excuse me, I'm sorry, but your time is up. I apologize. Thank you for
very
your
much.
comments.
Please pass Amendment 1.
Thank you. Who do we have next, Ms. Lacey?
Jenny Bass, who should be able to unmute.
Okay, hi, thank you. I'm a little distracted reading some of the discussion in the chat that I think would really have been taken care of if we could be in person and talk about some of these issues in person. But here we are, and thank you for letting me speak. My name's Jennifer Bass. I live in Elm Heights neighborhood. I'm going to keep my remarks very short. I'm speaking up in support of Amendment 1, and I ask you to respect the thoughtful and researched opinions of my neighbors and to not turn Bloomington into a free market experiment with few regulations controlled by developers who have no interest in investing in diverse and affordable housing stock. As for Amendment 2, it does not offer any real teeth for community input. I'm hoping we have a city government that's willing to listen to and respect the wishes of its citizens. We should be consulted, and we can work together towards a more inclusive, affordable, and sustainable Bloomington. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Who do we have next?
Councilmember Sims, I wanted to address a comment that I received in the chat having to do with the order in which I am announcing the speakers. They are coming in the order in which they are aligned on my screen, excepting where I've made a list on my paper. If somebody has dropped off, I do try and swing back and pick them up. So that's how they're being addressed in the order that I'm seeing them in my participant list.
Thank you for explaining that. I'm not sure there's a way that the Zoom function will numerically list people as they put their hands up. So we're simply doing the very best that we can. And it is my hope that we will get to everyone that wishes to speak. Thank you, Ms. Lacey. Who's next, please?
The next person is Michael Hamburger, who should be able to unmute now.
Hello, again, my name is Michael Hamburger. I'm a long-term Bloomington resident. I'm a lifelong environmentalist, a climate activist, and a big supporter of affordable housing. And I'd say also that I'm a big supporter of Mayor Hamilton, and I was one of the people who was really excited to welcome a new cohort of climate forward new members of the council, and looking forward to creating new forward-looking creative solutions to address the most challenging problems of our community and our world. So I would ordinarily be first person to jump on this this movement to create a sustainable, inclusive, affordable town. And I've been watching this debate from the sidelines, trying to make sense of the comments I've seen on both sides. Like many people here, I'm a deep supporter of compact urban form as a way to make our community environmentally efficient and also to avoid urban sprawl. But to be honest, I've been deeply disappointed by what I've seen from the city planning department. I feel like it's failed to do its due diligence to do the hard work to create a community consensus through a dynamic and continuing comprehensive planning process. I feel that the proposal that they've put forward creates an essentially irreversible city planning direction. It's put its faith entirely in this kind of free market approach to creating affordable housing, and it's failed to follow the precautionary principle to develop kind of appropriate guardrails to keep this experiment from spinning out of control. I think ultimately our community needs to create, together with the university, a comprehensive strategic plan that will effectively deal with the long-term needs of student housing and how it fits in the rest of the community. So last, I'd like to say, in contrast to some of my neighbors and friends, I'm not opposed to doing some experimentation. I'm a scientist. I think that experiments can effectively answer some of the questions we have posed here. However, to do an experiment without effective controls to allow forward movement in the hands of the free market system essentially is producing a disaster in the making. We have a whole series of intangible values that haven't been discussed so much here, the values of democracy, community, and neighborhood that are very much at risk here. So I hope the council will come together, support Amendment 1, and go back to the drawing board and support some real comprehensive planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamburger, for your comments. Who do we have next? Thank you.
Next is Kevin Romanak, who should be able to unmute.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can. Go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Sorry. Thank you all for listening to our comments and everything tonight. My name is Kevin Romanak. I'm the McDowell Gardens Neighborhood Association Executive Committee member. I'm here today on my behalf, though, as a renter of a house in McDowell Gardens. And, you know, I want to buy a house with my partner, and we're looking around the neighborhood and they go up really quick. The competition is really fierce. Seems like the landlord will offer $10,000 over asking price. So I just feel like, you know, you guys that aren't in favor of this amendment is kind of resetting the goalpost for us people trying to, you know, get a house in this neighborhood. So I also think and as far as the community goes, this is pretty risky. So yeah, so I would say, please vote for Amendment 1 for the community. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Next is Sharon Yarber, who should be able to unmute.
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, Ms. Yarber. Go ahead. You have about 3 minutes.
Hello. Good evening. My name is Sharon Yarber, and I'm a resident of Matlock Heights, which is an historic district in our community. I strongly urge members of the City Council to support and adopt Amendment 1. At first, when I heard about upzoning and was told that this could be a possible solution for affordable housing, I was supportive of that because I believe strongly that Bloomington does need more affordable housing in our community. But we now know, as admitted by the Plan Commission, that upzoning and plexes will not be a solution for affordable housing, as many have spoken to tonight. Plexes in the core neighborhoods will instead increase the unaffordability of housing and create upheaval in single-family neighborhoods. This experiment of plexes cannot be reversed. If this is a failure, residents of these neighborhoods will be the real losers. Please follow the comprehensive plan of do no harm and sustain single-family neighborhoods. I am grateful to those council members who have proposed Amendment 1 and support Amendment 1. I urge the other council members to do no harm and listen to the overwhelming voices who support Amendment 1 and save our core neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Ms. Lacey.
Next, we have Jami Scholl, who should be able to unmute.
Hello, my name is Jami Scholl. I want to make just a few points, so I'll make it very brief. I want to refute a statement that there are a number of parents, maybe single parents or people who are struggling who could not come to meetings. I did that in regards to urban agriculture 10 years ago for a number of years, and my kids were in tow. So if the will is there and you believe in something, you show up. Something that's not been mentioned is that oftentimes people who own homes, I'm looking at this as a possible way for people to build wealth and become invested in our community as community members. And when we look at that and Councilmember Smith's suggestion of using some of the monies coming from the Biden initiatives for COVID, that studies conducted by, say, Stanford University show that homeowners are more likely to be involved in the political process. We've seen a number of people get—
Ms. Scholl?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I've just been reminded by our parliamentarian that you spoke at the last meeting.
Okay.
So if you could just take about 15 seconds to finish up and we'll move on.
Okay.
So one speaking turn per time, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Homeowners are more likely to be involved in the political process more than renters. That may be why we are more likely hearing from people who are homeowners than renters in these meetings. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
No, thank you very much.
My apologies to the council. I thought that I had caught that in the cross reference, but I did not.
Oh no, if you just thank you, it's okay. I will make well, before we get started, I'm so sorry. Just like to clarify with all the folks that may have just signed on, we're allowing public comments to Amendment 1 for Ordinance 21-23, and we started public comment on Amendment 1 at our last meeting last Wednesday, and we're continuing today, and the public is allowed one comment on this piece of legislation. So I just want to remind folks, if you've already spoken last Wednesday to this Amendment 1 or earlier today, then we'll take that and then allow others to speak. While I have everyone, I'll ask you also too, that you can indicate your intention to speak publicly by using the raised hand function in Zoom, or you can send a notice to our meeting host via chat, and we will try to recognize you. And if there's more than one person on a device, please let us know so we can properly acknowledge you. Okay, thank you. Can we please proceed, Ms. Lacey?
Yes, the next person is Teal Bingham, who should be able to unmute.
Hi, my name is Teal Bingham. I live in the Waterman neighborhood. Last week, Councilmember Sandberg rightly acknowledged that we don't know exactly what will happen here. But then she said that her approach was to be conservative in making changes in order to, quote, do no harm. That comment stopped me in my tracks. And I've since heard several people repeat it tonight. Harm is already being done. To ignore it is to continue it. We have to question this position. Do no harm to whom? To those who already have the privilege of safe shelter, access to resources, and property ownership in these neighborhoods? And what harm will be done to them? I've heard people talk about parking inconveniences, change to personal wealth building by way of fluctuating property values, having to find ways to navigate noise or disagreements with more neighbors. Are any of these truly harmful? If we're trying to do no harm, we have to start by looking for what harm has already happened and is currently being done, and we have to work to correct it. We need to see the harm being done to people who can't access housing within walking distance of a grocery store, those who can't afford a car and need to get to medical appointments or multiple jobs. What about the harm to those who previously lived in or owned homes in these neighborhoods and were already pushed out by rising prices? You cannot claim to be doing no harm by turning your back on any current harms that are happening and refusing to change. The harms being done to lower income and disenfranchised groups in Bloomington are glaring and clear. Maintaining the status quo is not going to fix that. Having more neighbors is not a cause of harm. Please vote no on Amendment 1. Leave duplexes by right so we can create more opportunities for more community members and neighbors instead of denying them even the chance to be a part of our core neighborhood communities. We know that our current zoning laws do hurt affordable housing, and we need to change that in Bloomington. Additionally, we've already heard from many people in the core neighborhoods about the loss of affordability that's currently happening. And as a previous commenter, Eric Sadler, pointed out, keeping things as they are is not going to help, and that's been shown by the data. We need to make changes, not stay stagnant. Increased density is the way forward to adapt for the population growth that we already have happening in Bloomington and that will continue, and to allow us to reduce emissions in the city's goal to fight climate change. Many, many communities live healthily and happily in higher density than we have here, and we can do that here too. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Ms. Bingham. Who do we have next, Ms. Lacey?
That was really strong.
Next, we have Frederick Luehring, who should be able to unmute.
Yep, I could. Hi, I'm Fred Luehring, a 30-year resident of Bloomington, and I work in the IU physics department. Since 1998, I have lived in the Madison Park condominiums along the B line at Smith. I am not involved in any real estate or rentals, and I would like to point out what physicists call boundary conditions, the conditions that are present that we can't get around. The population of Bloomington is growing at just under 1% a year, at least over the last 10 years. It is very hard to annex additional land into the city. Look at what happened in 2017. The number of arterial roads would be hard, basically impossible to increase. The core neighborhoods can be lived in without owning a car, walking, walking, biking, and public transportation are available. The single family housing currently being built in the city is quite expensive on average. The consequences I see are that to provide affordable housing where it is most useful, density will need to go up near the university and downtown. Since the numbers of students and professionals who take care of the students are growing, new housing units have to be built. You need more bedrooms. These units can either be outside of the city where there is little input from the city and driving is required, or they can be built nearer to the city center where we do have control and cars are not needed. Generally, complexes built on the periphery of the city are low, wide buildings with big parking lots that maximally reduce the green space. Not increasing the density in the downtown core area will lead to urban sprawl. So it is my hope that there is a way to increase the density where people want to live. And to that end, I see no lower impact way to increase the density than to vote against, to allow duplexes and vote against Amendment 1. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. What do we have next, Ms. Lacey?
Next is Jack Horton, who should be able to unmute.
Yeah, hi, my name's Jack Horton, and I live in Bryant Park, and I wasn't even able to figure out how to raise my hand. I had to have a friend text me, so I think you should wait till you can do it in the open in the building there where you have your meetings. I support Ron Smith, Dave Rollo, and Susan Sandberg. Guess it's option 1 or amendment 1. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Horton, for your comments. Ms. Lacey.
Next is Lesa Huber, who should be able to unmute.
Hi, my name is Lesa Huber. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm a resident of Hoosier Acres and a longtime resident of Bloomington. I speak in support of Amendment 1. I do hope that Bloomington can find ways to increase options for affordable housing. It's so important that residents have an opportunity to buy a home, to maintain a home, and to live where they can work and play and enjoy Bloomington. But I do not believe that upzoning is the answer to this need. Last Sunday, I distributed over 70 flyers to my neighbors in Hoosier Acres and talked with many of them who were outside about upzoning. Every single one of my neighbors were very aware of this option. They were aware of Amendment 1, and they were aware of the risk that is being posed to the core neighborhoods. Many were outraged that elected officials would consider destroying the core neighborhoods. I do hope that Bloomington can find ways to increase options for affordable housing, but I do not believe that upzoning is the way. And I ask you to vote in favor of Amendment 1. Thank you.
For your comments.
Next is Hank Ruff, who should be able to unmute.
Yeah, is there no way to turn a camera on? It won't let me turn my camera on. Is that not okay?
No, we're just taking public comment, Mr. Ruff. I'm so sorry. You have about 3 minutes.
Okay. You know, you guys have heard the scientific arguments and sustainability arguments already, so I'm not gonna try to make statements on that, but more, you know, growing up here for 22 years now. First of all, the fact that this proposal is being brought up 2 years after, you know, the last council, which Councilmember Sims, you were part of, you guys spent like a year on this exact issue and hearing the arguments. And, you know, the fact it's kind of disrespecting and disregarding a tremendous amount of work done by the previous council very recently. So that's one thing I want to say. I've been listening all night, even though I should be studying for my physics exam, which is tomorrow. But this issue is super important to me, just growing up here and growing up in Elm Heights. And you know, Professor Hamburger, I respect his opinion super strongly. And I think he's totally right. There's ways to increase affordable housing without taking away all the safeguards to ensure that Elm Heights doesn't become the Dillon 2.0 or Evolve 2.0. And I'm a 22-year-old college kid who, I mean, I party in my friend's party, and I don't know any professors around here in Elm Heights that would want to live. We have a perfect middle ground right now. But if it was all of us 21 and 22-year-old kids. I mean, it's just going to be, it's going to be so undesirable for any professors or any single families to live in the city that, I mean, it would be logical that they're all going to move to the suburbs because, I don't know anyone who'd want to live next to that. And Owen Rogers, who spoke earlier, referencing, wealthy people complaining about not wanting to live near students. I don't think it's a joke because I think, this weekend, I'm sure the health department saw how us college kids were partying at Evolve this past weekend, how it was probably 3,000 kids just piled up, partying and being loud. And this is how college kids are. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of these kids, I mean, I'm in a fraternity, their parents will have no problem spending top dollar to live right here still. And any investor will see that. I mean, why wouldn't an investor come in and buy up these lots and these houses and fit tons of rich East and West Coast out-of-state kids, all over? It's not going to increase affordability. So, right now, my neighbor to my left is Kathy Sidelli, who's a faculty here at IU. And then my neighbor to my right is 2 Jacobs School kids. And it's great. It's a perfect balance.
Mr. Ruff, I'm sorry, but your time has been exhausted.
Okay, I just want to say to Councilmember Rosenbarger and Flaherty, I'm glad you guys won, but no one voted you in on these Plex issues.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ruff, your time is up. Thank you.
Next up, we have Solomon Bogdanoff. I apologize for the pronunciation.
No worries. It's a difficult name. So my name is Solomon Bogdanoff. I'm a graduate of IU. I grew up in both the greater LA area and Bloomington. And unlike many students who are here and at the past couple of meetings, including in 2008, I am not organized or coached by any representatives of IU. I'm here of my own volition. I wanted to say how it surprised me how Bloomington, which presents itself as a very progressive city, has even suggests the possibility of opening this door up to the Wall Street kind of neoliberal attitude, just because of how those who would be able to profit and invest from these duplexes and triplexes would not be the local citizens, many of whom cannot afford to begin with, but the venture capitalists who can afford to drop $40–50 million whenever they feel like it. These are people who value profit over common good. And then after recouping their investment, after a couple of years have gone by, they would proceed to sell these properties not to the working class families who would not be able to pay top dollar, but to the rental companies that are already making such a profit out of the housing crisis by inflating prices. It's worth mentioning again, as other people have, that students are much better able to afford higher housing, particularly in tri and quadplexes, because whereas a working family can compete with 1 or 2 students living there, the income from 3, 4, 5 students living in one house, there's absolutely no way that a working class family would be able to compete with them. And so to address the topic of climate change, which of course every responsible citizen, it is their duty to do whatever they physically are capable of to stop and reverse its effects, I don't really see how this plan would really affect a significant change. The idea of Bloomington as a car-dependent city, after having lived in LA for so long, seems kind of quaint. Thank you. Whereas so many, drivers in LA will commute an hour. Bloomington, the drives are fairly short. There's not that much in carbon emissions compared to many US cities. Also, I'd like to point out that most of the students that I knew, even the ones that lived on campus, had cars, and even the ones who really cared about the climate proceeded to drive regardless. And many people have already mentioned living next to students. If you are not lucky enough to live very close to student rentals, I recommend spending an hour in People's Park across from Kilroy's. That is a pretty accurate simulator of what it's like. And lastly, I wanted to point out that as, thank you, more available housing comes about, IU will admit more students to make more money, and then there will be another housing crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Who do we have next, Ms. Lacey?
Next, we have an individual with the screen name David, who
Hi.
should be able.
You can hear me? My name is David Bowden. I live in Blue Ridge. I've been resident with a few years out since 1976. I support Amendment 1. I do not support Amendment 2. I have to say how very disappointed and discouraged I am by the fact that we're talking about this again. It's very disrespecting, as an earlier person said, for us to go back again to a conclusion that was reached with a lot of dialogue with the community. Lack of affordable housing is an important thing that we have to discuss, but upzoning is not a solution to the problem. It's been well stated over and over in the comments that this just will not work. And I have to agree with the former speaker that city planning has really failed to do its job. I thought that Marcia Baron and Michael Hamburger and Sharon Yarber, Hank Ruff, they all eloquently stated that this really is a disaster in the making. We can't know what the outcome is. And where Teal Bingham said that we'd be turning our back on lower income and disenfranchised, no, this zoning change won't even address that. That is not what this will do. It's the wrong approach to a very real problem. So it's clear to me that the large majority of callers tonight and last week, and I listened to both, support Amendment 1. If you as elected officials go against this clear will of the people you represent, you do a profound disservice to our community and to your role as representatives of that community, and you reduce your credibility. I implore you to listen to the majority of your voters and vote for Amendment 1 in order to save our core neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Who do we have next, Ms. Lacey?
Next, we have Amy Berndtson, who should be able to unmute.
Okay. Oh, okay. I just wanted to thank the city councilman for listening to the community, and I hope you are truly listening. And I also want to, as everyone has said, we're worried about a very uncontrolled experiment. And I think what's the beauty of Amendment 1 is that it would allow for controlled experiments, specifically development at the old hospital region, and again, where the Kmart is. And remember, the hospital is going to be moving to the other side of town. So this concept of the core neighborhoods and the core, everybody wanting to be close to downtown, may be changing. We can't really predict where the centers are going to be in the next 10 or 15 years. So I really hope that you follow Amendment 1 and use this as an opportunity to do a small controlled experiment so we can really address affordable housing and really sort of in a way that supports the entire community. And that's all I guess I want to say, but I want to thank everybody for participating.
Thank you for your comments.
Next, we have Wendy Bricht, who should be able to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Thank you for your patience. You have about 3 minutes.
All right, thank you very much for hearing us. This is a stressful time, I think, for a lot of residents. And there are many people in Bloomington that are appalled and kind of horrified that our city government would do this again. When our history with student rentals replacing our core neighborhoods is so clear and visible. Many people don't think they can do anything to stop it, so they're not even here. And many more are simply unaware of the zoning changes. This is not a new experiment. It's been done before. I was there. This is a town with a huge university and different rules apply here. The total studentification of parts of Elm Heights and the areas north of campus were the result of the previous experience with experiments with upzoning, and we never reclaimed them. The previous inhabitants, the tradespeople and families are gone, and with them any diversity in these blocks and areas. Our previous devastating experience with upzoning prompted the current zoning to protect what was left. Every new plex will strain the neighborhoods that are already staggering under the amount of student rentals that have been proliferating in recent years. We are outnumbered and sometimes overwhelmed, and we are at the tipping point in many blocks. The insatiable demand for student housing will never be met in Elm Heights enough to bring down prices. Not if 1,000 duplexes were built in them. According to a housing expert's recent report, Bloomington City has 50 years of infill before it needs to touch the cores. There are plenty of good places to build housing that won't destroy core neighborhoods with student housing. Transportation corridors and villages are the answer to increased density. The more we protect homeownership in Bloomington, by not only protective and targeted zoning where it is needed, but also by other methods like limited rental licenses and the proximity of student rentals. And most importantly, by protecting mortgages is the only thing that will work to lower housing costs, where the rental demand is unlimited. The demand for student housing will never be met in a desirable neighborhood close to IU to bring down prices. We do have affordable housing in Bloomington. The only reason we don't have more is the competition. And looking at current listings, I see that among many others in Bryant Park, you can pay $875 a month for a mortgage on a modest-sized but pleasant two-bedroom house with a very large lot in Bryant Park, or $1,600 for a mortgage on a beautiful three-bedroom limestone house close to campus on Maxwell Lane. Both are close to campus. These same properties allowed to be plexed will rent for $3,600 and $4,200 a month, and the money won't go to building equity in someone's home. It'll go to rental investors and equity looking for top dollar rent. How do we know it'll go to students? Look around. All rentals are all expensive, and almost all of them are rented to students. Each side of these new plexes will rent for more than the original mortgage in these neighborhoods, and more than what the rent would cost on the original structure. This is the reality for us, and this is why we need to protect our still affordable housing in areas most at risk.
I'm sorry, Ms. Bricht, your time is up. Can you finish up in about 10 seconds?
Yeah, the welfare and happiness of Bloomington residents, and by that I do mean its permanent residents. Each one of them should be the primary goal of the city government, not a sledgehammer of a plan that may or may not work to sometime in the distant future provide more housing, but that we know will. Okay.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Next, we have John Kennedy, who should be able to unmute.
Hello, I'm John Kennedy, and I support Amendment 1 for 4 reasons. First, the desire to change the UDO to allow duplexes in the R zones has been divisive and not collaborative. Will make it much more difficult to get the widespread support that's needed to solve the problem of affordable housing in Bloomington. Second, the divisiveness introduced by this desire to have duplexes in the R zone has harmed the city's reputation as a nice place to live. This harm can still be undone if council listens to the many supporters of the Amendment 1. Third, the change to the UDO may lead to civil lawsuits. Certainly many property owners would have standing, and changes to the UDO that are not consistent with the comprehensive plan would provide merit. Fourth, the change to the UDO indicates to local developers that the UDO is not stable. The city has a reputation that it makes development difficult. Changing the UDO quickly like this makes it more evident. Further, it's been said by city officials that the UDO is a 3-ring binder and can be changed quickly. If in 2 years there's a new mayor or the composition of the council changes, the code may change again. Zoning code should be changed only when necessary and when needed. This change is not necessary because it will not solve any problems and may exacerbate many. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy, for your comments.
President Sims, there are
Yes.
two speakers remaining, both of whom spoke previously. It's unclear to me whether there's another person using their device. Shall I unmute and we can ask the question, or how would you like to proceed?
Yes, let's unmute one of the, well, who do you have?
The first one is Stephen Lehman.
Yes, please unmute him.
He should be able to unmute.
Yes, actually, This is Stephen Lehman.
Yes,
Actually,
sir.
I did not get to speak last week. I had to go to bed, get ready for work the next day, and I failed to take my hand down before I left the meeting. So I did not speak last week.
Okay.
I think that's true.
You have 3 minutes, Mr. Lehman.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. First, I want to just say that my name's Steve Lehman. I live in Arden Place. I support Amendment 1. I object to the zoning initiative. It's already been objected to and rejected by a majority of Bloomington citizens 2 years ago, and I see no reason to put it back on the table at this point. We bought our home 20 plus years ago in a single family home neighborhood. I consider any forced change to that purchase as theft. The bank that set me up in this place with my mortgage and everything, they wouldn't be allowed to make a change like that on me. That serious a change. So I'm just asking that everybody consider, everyone on the council, consider the people that have spoken tonight and the different objections that they've had. Please vote in favor of Amendment 1. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Who do we have next, Ms. Lacey?
Next, this person has not spoken before. It's Peter Bogdanoff.
Are you there? Are you there, Ms.? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, hi, I'm Peter Bogdanoff, and I'm saying for Amendment 1. I was a grad student at IU 30 years ago and went away from Bloomington to raise a family. And now I'm back living in a single family home in Elm Heights. As a renter 30 years ago, I did not vote. I did not care about city government. It was just not part of my life. But now as a homeowner, I do care, I do vote. And I expect that city government will consider my needs. I'm going to ask you, Bloomington City Council members, who are you serving? Are you serving yourselves? Are you serving outside developers? Are you serving a world that is outside of Bloomington? Are you serving transient students like I was, who don't know who you are and don't care much about Bloomington itself? Or are you serving those who do care about Bloomington and who do vote? You have other options at this point. Many people have mentioned them and what can be done, both the work that's been done in the past and the work that would be in front of you to do in the future. Don't take the easy way out and drop your responsibility to serve the people of Bloomington. Please vote for Amendment 1.
Thank you very much for your comments. Who do you have next, Ms. Lacey?
Next is Russ Lyons, who should be able to unmute.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Russ Lyons. There's obviously overwhelming sentiment against Amendment 1. In favor of Amendment 1. I also support Amendment 1. I don't want to take any more time by repeating the wonderful arguments that have already been made. I just want to register my support for Amendment 1. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Next, we have a person with the screen name T Payne at IGLOU, who should be able to unmute and state their full name.
And my name is Tom Payne. I'm a resident of the Near West Side. And I'm in favor of Amendment 1 and grateful to Representative Sandberg and her colleagues for putting it together. One of the things you learn in journalism is follow the money. And what's driving the YIMBY movement nationwide, of which this is one example, is clearly developers' interests. We see a lot of support for YIMBY by Mike Braun, Trey Hollingsworth, folks like that who, quite candidly are probably not known for being social justice warriors. look at what's driving this and ask yourselves if that's really what we want. If the upzoning plan really goes through, this represents a twofer for Hollingsworth and Braun, because not only were they able to do something for their moneyed interests who are going to take money out of Bloomington and put it in real estate investment trusts as opposed to in the coffers of local restaurants and businesses. But also the other thing that this is doing, and that this debate is doing, is Braun and Hollingsworth are sitting here watching Bloomington's Democrats eat their own young. All right, we are dividing ourselves, one of the few bastions of the Democratic Party in this state, and we're completely at odds over this issue. We do not know, quite candidly, whether upzoning is going to solve the affordable housing problem. It would be great to solve the affordable housing problem, and I think Susan and the others have asked to have the time to do this properly, to look at what our options are and figure out how we can solve it. I'm in favor of density. I'm in favor of diversity. But there's this great leap of faith that the YIMBY movement is going to suddenly create affordable housing where there's no reasonable reason to think that that's going to happen. Thank you all for the incredible amount of time and patience that you've put into this. And that's all I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Payne, for your comments. Who do we have next, Ms. Lacey?
Next is William's iPad, who I believe can unmute and state their full name.
Hi, my name is William Fuqua. I want to thank the council members for allowing us to participate in this process and for hearing our opinions. I want to voice my support for Amendment 1 very emphatically. I think there have been a number of extremely convincing arguments tonight to that effect. It's clear that the goals of those that are driving the UDO changes will not be met by the proposed changes, and that Amendment 1 will allow us to test those ideas and to control where these changes to the format of housing are allowed, and will give us much greater control and not hand it over to the developers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments. Who do we have next?
The last member of the public with their hand raised, and I will need to sort through the chat here in just a minute, is Kevin Romanak, who spoke previously, but it's unclear to me if there's another person using his device.
Can you unmute?
Mr. Romanak should be able to.
Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, this is a different person. My name is Rubia Higgins, and I have lived in the McDowell Gardens neighborhood for 5 years. My fiance and I are currently renting, but want badly to own our house in this neighborhood. During the 5 years we lived here, more houses on our small street have been sold and turned into rentals. This has not made it more affordable to live in our neighborhood, but has done the exact opposite. Rent prices have increased drastically due to landlords purchasing surrounding houses way above asking price. 5 years ago, we may have been able to buy our house if our landlord would have agreed. But now with the development of Switchyard Park behind our house, along with the added high dollar rentals on our street, we're being pushed out of the neighborhood we love and have called home. It has been so hard for my fiance and I to find an affordable house to purchase here in Bloomington. It makes me feel the city does not want people like us here, people that want to buy a house instead of roots, people that make the city what it is. I ask that you vote in favor of Amendment 1 and give the people of Bloomington the opportunity to become homeowners. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Next, we have Shell's iPhone, and the person should be able to unmute and state their full name.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'm Shelley Fratiani. I live in Elm Heights, and I just wanted to voice my support for the amendment. I do not support increased density in the core neighborhoods. I don't think it will have the stated intended effect. I don't think it's a good thing for the city or the neighborhoods. And I'd like to see the neighborhoods stay the way they are. I think there's other ways to address those needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Do we see anyone else? Ms. Lacy?
There are no more raised hands. Chat is turned on if someone is wishing to speak on Amendment 1. They can chat the meeting host. We would ask that chats to everyone discontinue though.
Okay, seeing any?
It looks like there's one. Melissa Inverno, who should be able to unmute.
Yes, that's me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You have 3 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Okay, great. I'm going to be very brief. I've been listening all night. I am speaking in support of Amendment 1. I do believe that there are housing issues that Bloomington has to deal with. I do not believe that this is the way to do it. I think that Amendment 1 gives us the time and the focus to be able to solve this in other ways. I think people have spoken very eloquently tonight, and I just want to thank you for listening to our voices.
And thank you for participating. Do we have anyone else that you can see, Ms. Lacy?
Gregory Stone, if you'll give me just 1 second here.
Yes.
Should be able to unmute.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mr. Stone. You have about 3 minutes.
Hello. Thank you. I really have a couple questions more than a statement. I'm a temporary returned resident to my hometown right now, so I don't want to impose upon the larger conversation of those who live here full time. At the beginning of all of this, there was a PowerPoint that reviewed Amendment 1, and it said that information from out of the census indicates that there's a housing shortage. I was curious what that data and information is, meaning what the demand for housing in Bloomington is. I'm hearing a lot about supply and intention of supply, but not a lot of what the exact demands and numbers therefore are, because it would give a clearer image as to what sort of commitments the respective neighborhoods within the 4 zones would be having to wrap their heads around. I'm not necessarily for or against. I haven't really been privy to much of this conversation. I just learned about what's going on Friday. So I'm sorry to take up too much time if it's not of value. But whatever the comprehensive plan is for Bloomington city development, it seems as though whatever these duplex potentialities happen to be ought to fit with what that comprehensive view is. And that it would be easier to understand what neighborhoods are investing themselves within by tethering to what the comprehensive view of Bloomington's future may or may not be. So in my humble opinion, I just believe that it may be best to delay this vote, as I personally would vote no without more transparency of details and without there being obvious guarantees that protect the integrity of the community culture at large, which seems to be the largest concern expressed by everyone so far. And does that mean I have 1 minute? Okay.
No, you have about 30 seconds. Just please finish. You're fine.
Well, that's all really. I just suppose everyone seems to be expressing no, 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 but many have said yes. At the same time, after expressing many worries and anxieties and fears. So I wonder if there's any possibility of guarantees contractually that state we aren't opening ourselves up to redlining, or a domino effect of suddenly duplexes take over these neighborhoods, these respective 4 zones, and that we are looking out for the single occupancy families that already exist here, and that additions are complementary to whatever culture at large Bloomington is preserving within its comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Next is Michael McCafferty, who should be able to unmute.
Are you there, Mr. McCafferty? Mr. McCafferty? Okay, Ms. Lacey, can we go to the next person and we'll catch him if he can get unmuted?
Yes. Susan Buzan, who should be able to unmute.
Now can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead. You have about 3 minutes.
I'll be very brief. I do support Amendment 1. I'm pretty much confused about what all has been discussed and what we're where we are with it, but I do know I for the moment do support Amendment 1, and I don't support further density in the neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Is Mr. McCafferty available? You're muted, Ms. Lacey.
I know, I apologize. There are so many messages in the chat. It's difficult to sort through and find. I have found his comment. It says, I have lived in Bloomington for 50 years and saw firsthand how the neighborhood north and northwest of campus went from single family housing to nearly 100% rental housing. The area is now a wasteland compared to what it was before. In-town and out-of-town interests devoured the owner-occupied houses as they went on to the market. Opening up the core neighborhoods to plexes is inviting the same downward spiral of quality of life that happened north and northwest of the campus. More cars, more noise, but not affordable housing. And that's the end of that comment.
Okay, thank you. Do we see any more hand raised or?
There are no more raised hands, and I don't believe that there are any more individuals who have messaged the meeting host to ask to speak this evening on Amendment 1.
Okay, thank you very much. Seeing that we have or are not aware of any more public comments, we now return to the council for final comments on Amendment 1. And I can, if you raise your hand, I'll have to flip my screen because I can't see everyone. Okay, we're now to council comments on Amendment 1. Councilmember Rollo.
Thank you. I'll submit my prepared comments from last week for the minutes as well. But just to summarize, what's been proposed in this UDO revision by the Plan Commission is a massive and profound change in zoning. And the public recognizes that, or is beginning to. It affects every neighborhood in Bloomington. It allows and incentivizes conversion of single-family homes to rentals. Indeed, that is its primary purpose because ADUs, which I support, are already allowed by right. And the difference is they require owner occupancy. Duplexes do not. The economic incentive for this conversion is significant. In effect, this changes the zoning landscape of homes in Bloomington to incentivize conversion of rentals by allowing duplexes. This is especially true in core neighborhoods near campus. The economic incentive for market rate rents will be seized on, and the developers will then compete with home buyers to drive up costs. So we'll see costs of homes going up. The decline in the number of single-family homes by conversion will also drive up costs. This will occur whether or not the process works by right, as it is in this revision, which we're considering this evening, or by conditional use, as proposed by a future amendment. We need to tell the public that conditional use at this stage simply means a couple of meetings which has no real effect on the outcome. The BZA Board of Zoning Appeals will simply follow the code. Right now, in a hurried fashion, council members are trying to place restrictions on what will be unleashed in order to achieve certain outcomes. Indeed, Councilmember Sandberg and I have one on affordability coming. We prefer not to go there in a rushed and hurried fashion. But whatever we do this week, it will be what you do, what I do will be suboptimal, especially considering the magnitude of this change. This is not how planning policy should work in an ad hoc and hurried fashion. It is a complicated process and one at odds with comprehensive plan that is supposed to direct us on where to make changes in zoning. The proponents of allowing conversion of single-family homes to duplexes have simply disregarded the comprehensive plan, ignored the directives to avoid placing these forms in neighborhoods. This is a shame, since the comp plan goes to great lengths to tell us where this form should go. We included this in a concept plan along with Amendment 1 that's been referred to this evening. That is density with a purpose. Density to facilitate village centers where such density is needed, not a scattershot approach throughout neighborhoods based on the whims of the market. Proponents of duplexes in all neighborhoods should have advocated a change in the comprehensive plan first that would have engendered a community debate and discussion. An inclusionary process post-pandemic when we can gather to work through these issues. That would have been the correct approach. But what we have witnessed and what we're left with tonight is simply a top-down approach for expediency. The residents of Bloomington are not happy with this undemocratic approach. I count the vast majority as opposed, 8-1 by email, over 3-1 by testimony and public comments, about 9-1 this evening. As I mentioned last week, I do agree insofar with the administration that what this consists of is an experiment, but experiments, as has been mentioned, should be done in a limited fashion, not citywide. For instance, I note that the R4 district and the student housing district both allow plexus in this plan. R4 has hundreds of single-family homes and over 1,000 flexible lots. The student housing district has over 800 lots. Many of these are amenable to plexus. Why, with that, conduct such an experiment citywide at the same time? Why in such a reckless and sloppy fashion? This density is valuable, by the way. It should be applied to village centers. That yields a sustainable community. So please support Amendment 1, scale back this experiment, follow the comprehensive plan. Let's not proceed in the coming days to try to fix a broken concept in an ad hoc approach with limited time. That risks mistakes and unintended consequences. Listen to the residents that will be affected by this reckless approach. It risks a failure of confidence in their local government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rallo.
President.
Councilmember Bowler.
I want to know if we are actually going to be timed on our comments. just want to know how much time we'll have to speak.
I'd like, well, let me flip so I can see Councilmember Flaherty. At the beginning, are you there? I know we had discussed 3 minutes for public comment and a like number for council members. Is that proper? Did I understand that correctly?
I'm having a hard time recalling the motion offhand. Was it 3 minutes for debate?
Well, I think that was for debate, yes.
I think that's right. Then I think Mr. Ralla may have just exceeded it by a bit, but
that's right. I was timing. I wasn't sure. Final comments was at that. So the whole point was that our public got to speak for 3 minutes. We thought that was appropriate for council members on this amendment. Seeing as how I allowed, it was 3 minutes and 54 or 59 seconds, what I got, or 4 minutes. So if we have council comments, I think it's appropriate. If I, as president, can do that, say 4 minutes for final comments on this amendment 1. Is that proper?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Did you have your hand up, Councilmember Owen, to speak?
No, I just wanted to clarify the time limit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm looking for final comment hands. Councilmember Scambolery, you're just on a different screen. I saw your dancing hand. Thank you.
Oh, I figured you'd get to me sooner or later. So thank you. A few observations to start. First of all, in terms of process, credit where credit's due. While this process was imperfect, I think, due in large part to COVID, I believe that overall it has been adequate twice. I think the information available to council and to the public has been well presented, particularly via the web, twice. And multiple bodies have offered multiple occasions for public input, twice. Next, the need for housing. I believe Bloomington really does have an affordable housing crisis. I don't think it's imagined or exaggerated, even with all the apartment units that are being built. We really do need more affordable housing. And I believe that in that regard, what needs to be emphasized is home ownership and the opportunity it brings to build equity over time and to promote stability in neighborhoods. Next, constraints that we face. If we could require new plexes to be owner occupied, at least in part, this entire conversation would have been very different, but that's not an option. Theoretically, we could incentivize owner occupancy, but in the absence of those incentives, I don't believe we have enough tools in place to dissuade those developers and property owners who see the profit potential in simply creating more market rate student rentals. Next, rentals versus owner occupied. I do believe that in a university town, and I'm going to say that again, in a university town, rental properties and owner occupied properties have a qualitatively different impact on their neighborhoods. And we've heard exactly that point from a number of faculty, a number of students tonight, and a number of staff as well. Can rental properties be beautifully maintained and occupied by friendly, involved neighbors? Of course they can. Can a homeowner neglect their property to the extent that it pulls down the value of surrounding homes? Of course they can. That said, for the most part, I believe that these two different kinds of properties can and do impact our neighborhoods differently. And we need to make a special effort to examine how neighborhoods have evolved to date and to anticipate as best we can how these plexes that are proposed would actually play out in our city. So why don't I just trust the judgment of staff and the Plan Commission? I have a great deal of respect for the skill and expertise both of our planning staff and the members of the Plan Commission. That said, there is a fundamental difference in our roles. Those public servants, as skilled and committed as they are, do not have any obligation to represent Bloomington residents. We do, period, full stop. It is never sufficient to simply count up the number of emails pro or con, or count up the number of speakers pro or con, and vote accordingly. But I can't ignore the overwhelming opposition I've heard to conditional and by right plexes. It's come through public meetings, through emails, through phone calls, and in my last 6 constituent meetings. Why not conditional as a compromise? On the very first night we began debating this ordinance, I said that much of my decision, my willingness to consider conditional zoning, hinged on the degree to which conditional zoning would actually inject more caution and intentionality into the addition of new plexes. Since then, I've spoken with multiple planning and transportation staff and with current and former members of the BZA. Again, I have a great deal of respect for the skill and expertise of those individuals, but I don't believe that a required appeal to a hearing officer or to the BZA would be anything beyond a minor speed bump. It wouldn't.
You have about 15 seconds. I'm sorry, please continue.
It wouldn't adequately respond to the widespread concerns we've heard for months now, and it wouldn't provide the controls we need. I think we have opportunities to do more than simply allow plexes conditionally. I'll be voting to support Amendment 1, and I plan to oppose Amendment 2. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I don't see any hands up. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, President Sims. As we could see tonight, there was overwhelming opposition to allowing plexes everywhere and in support of Amendment 1. I think it disturbs me that the UDO proposal was put forth after it was already solved in 2019. And here we are again, and it is against the will of our constituents. And I really believe that everybody is sincere about what they feel about this, and they feel like it will harm them. And it's just hard for me to understand how we can go forward with allowing the plexes when there's such overwhelming consternation with our constituents. And there's not solid evidence to support what the administration is saying. And in fact, I think it's rather vague what they're saying. Is it affordable? Is it more density? I don't know what they want. And I think the public has somewhat of a general consternation and confusion about that as well. I would like to see making home ownership more available to people who of lower income. We can do that with some of the money, the American Rescue Fund that the feds are sending us. They're sending us $23 million. We certainly can do that. We can help people build wealth, build generational wealth, do better. We can help them in many ways. We can build the village centers. We can, Ms. Scanlon even said there's a lot of things in the toolbox to do. Well, yeah, let's do a lot of those, but I'm not sure that allowing plexes everywhere does anything for us. So, I'm one of the sponsors of the amendment, and of course I support it, but it didn't change my mind on anything people said. And in fact, it solidified the fact that allowing plexes everywhere is just not a good idea. It's just a bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Okay, going to the next page. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to everybody who has shared their views tonight and last week and via email. It's great to see so many people engaged in this process. I represent people who live in Henderson Court, Acadia Court, Timber Ridge, Summit Point, Barclay Square, Walnut Springs, Walnut Grove, Walnut Woods, and Oaklawn Terrace, just to name a few multifamily housing developments in District 5. I have not heard from any of them. So when I hear people say, look, everybody that has spoken tonight, or the vast majority, are in favor of Amendment 1, that doesn't mean a vast majority of my constituents are in favor of Amendment 1. That means people who are plugged in, who have the time and intellect and energy to figure out that the city is talking about something that may affect them. That those are the people who have the time and ability to speak about amendments to our Unified Development Ordinance. So one person this evening asked whether we represent residents, and I'm paraphrasing, or do we represent permanent residents? Well, I represent all residents in District 5, whether they're here for 2 months or 30 years. So I take that seriously. I also think that, we don't have a direct democracy, as somebody said, we have a representative democracy, and I was elected to represent and not necessarily to poll on every single issue. So I'm opposed to Amendment 1. I think we need more housing, and one efficient way to get more housing and to have it be in an environmentally sound place where people don't have to drive everywhere is in our older neighborhoods. Greater density also makes transit more feasible. If we want our buses to run more frequently, we need greater density. It's much more sustainable to build more, to create more units closer to where people learn, work, and play than to have them built on the outskirts of the city. It's been said that this is a radical concept. Duplexes are a historic housing form. It's not radical. It's been done for decades. And then just briefly to address this question of why are we talking about this again? Well, the UDO has always been a living document. It's something that we have said repeatedly before we passed the UDO at the early 2020. And frankly, elections have consequences. When people elect a new council, a new mayor, a new president, a new Congress, it's natural to revisit other issues. I mean, we're thankful when Joe Biden revisits what Donald Trump did. I'm not comparing anybody to those individuals, but I'm just saying that in elections, there are consequences, and it's totally legitimate to reconsider issues. And just for the record, when I voted on the UDO to include the sentence that's now being quoted saying the core neighborhood should not be where greater density is concentrated, I was thinking of apartment buildings. I mean, I was thinking of 4 or 5 story student housing. To me, duplex is not high density. Duplex is not what I had in mind. So just as a caution, and of course in Amendment 2, there'll be other quotes that are in support of mixed housing types. The UDO can be read in more than one way, legitimately. So I will be opposing.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Piedmont Smith. I'm sorry. I know. Thank you very much. Okay. Do we have any further comment from the council? Councilmember Flaherty.
Thank you, President Sims. Thank you to everyone from the public for their comments and engagement on this issue. I very much appreciate it. And I've appreciated being able to dig into the details over many, many hours of conversations with constituents on all sides of this issue, really for years now, since first deciding to run for office, and even frankly before that, since we've been discussing ADUs, I've been having many, many hours of conversations with people all over the community about the details of these policies. First, I'll just say that at a high level, I support the concept plan of this amendment that calls out the village centers concept, which is of course part of our adopted comprehensive plan. So I support that approach to enhance and plan for multiple economic and cultural hubs throughout the city, creating walkable nodes of activity around those centers. I think that's all really great. But I also think that the concept plan accompanying the amendment somewhat misapplies the form-based idea of the transect. It doesn't apply it appropriately, in my view, to either the notion of a walkable village center, nor to the existing and historic context of Bloomington's neighborhoods. Most of these neighborhoods and all of the older neighborhoods have always included small-scale attached housing, like duplexes, threeplexes, fourplexes, all of these forms that, as an empirical matter, provide more affordable and sustainable housing options and help welcome more residents into our neighborhoods. They've always played an important role in the history of housing in Bloomington. So while I very much support the village centers concept called for in the comp plan and this concept plan, I find Ordinance 2123 to be complementary to that policy and not contradictory. One other note is that, having thoroughly read the comprehensive plan numerous times, I share the view of city staff that this amendment is really just not consistent with our adopted goals and plans. Though I respect that some council members disagree. But I'll be voting no on Amendment 1, though I appreciate, again, hearing from fellow council members and all members of the public on this issue. I definitely have more thoughts on the merits of the ordinance, and I'll save those for our continued discussion after a vote on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Flaherty. Do we have any other final comments from council? Thank you for your patience. I'm flipping between screens to see if I see anyone. Okay, Councilmember Sandberg.
I would certainly like to comment, but I would, as one of the co-sponsors of this amendment, I would like to be able to go last if that's possible.
Yes, we can do that. Did you have to speak, Councilmember Kate Rosenbarger?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to start definitely by saying thank you to everyone who has participated tonight, last week, in email, in regular mail, and of course, just in the multi-year process that this is. I think it's rather exciting that we're finally nearing an end here. I want to say I value public discussion even when some of us disagree. And while some disagree that this process has been forced, I echo what some other council members have said, that I think though I'm fairly certain that we've had more public engagement in this than ever before. And for that, I am very grateful. I like that there is more accessibility in these meetings. And I think that lends itself well to a robust discussion. I think something that gets lost in this debate is that duplexes and triplexes and quadplexes, for that matter, are good housing forms. They're good options for folks who can't afford single family homes. They create communities with shared spaces and help out with climate change and equity in our neighborhoods just all across our city. I think they should be encouraged. The administration first brought a proposal to the public allowing up to quadplexes in the neighborhoods. And with many hours of public debate, the administration adapted their plan and recommended duplexes as conditional in R1, 2, and 3. I will say I appreciate this compromise. I think it's very democratic. I think something for me that is hard to understand is the willingness of people supporting plexes to compromise, but the unwillingness of those opposed to give an inch. This has already been talked about a little as well, but we have 80,000 residents in Bloomington, and I represent roughly 15,000 residents. When I hear people say a majority of people support this, I don't really know what that means. I think maybe 1,000 people, maybe 2,000 people have participated in this discussion, and that's roughly 1% to 2% of our population. That's why I listen to people participating. I use a comprehensive plan, and I make evidence-based, research-based decisions. And that's where the evidence really comes in here, that re-allowing plexes in our neighborhood is just overwhelmingly supported in the country, right? The Brookings Institute, Strongtown, Smart Growth America, Sightline, the Urban Institute, the Biden administration, along with Pete Buttigieg, Marcia Fudge, Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, the Democrats in the House, the Democrats in the Senate. there are so many books, Missing Middle Housing, The Color of Law, The Affordable City, countless articles from Obama advisors, housing equity and climate experts. And so that is what has really guided my decision to stick with plexes and reallow them again in our neighborhood. So for these reasons, I will not be supporting Amendment 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rosebarger. Okay, Councilmember Boland.
The first thing I want to do is disabuse us of the notion that somehow we've tried the upzoning experiment before. To my knowledge, we never have. If anything, there has been no previous experiment with upzoning. It's been a constant state of downzoning for the past 50 years. The most significant change in zoning law in the city's history was limiting a unit to 3 unrelated adults. The city went to the Supreme Court to defend this change. The permissibility of duplexes pales in comparison to that tectonic change. It's not a reversal of 3 unrelated adults per unit being proposed here. Back when Charlotte Zittler was elected to the council, she wrote in her autobiography, Minister's Daughter, that the prior council would spot zone everything. Hundreds of cases where they would simply declare a piece of land to have a different zoning so that the developer could do what they wanted on it. And more than 50 years ago, the way that the city council did business was they would read by title and synopsis only, and then they'd vote. There was nothing else in between. There was no presentation, no question and answer, no public comment, no council debate. That's how they did business in the late 60s. And of course, the Democrats who took over in 72 changed all that. They made things, we are now at the opposite end. We allow for hours and hours of public comment and debate. I would like to reread the comprehensive plan of 2018. I think we're missing some points. Policy 5.3.3 describes the phrase non-student oriented multifamily housing. The next policy says to redirect new student-oriented housing developments away from the downtown and nearby areas toward more appropriate locations closely proximate to the IU campus, etc. The UDO created an entirely new zoning type called mixed-use student housing north of 17th, west of the stadium, and thousands of new units specifically for students have been approved there. But all we're focused on is policy 5.3.1 and one sentence in it. One sentence, that last sentence, avoid placing these high density forms in single family neighborhoods, was the result of Amendment 49 to Ordinance 1728, sponsored by former Councilmember Sturbaum. It obviously runs counter to the rest of policy 5.3.1, which calls for increased residential densities and to utilize the very types that the Planning and Transportation Department has been suggesting. They have been following the comp plan. And this one sentence has been emphasized almost at the expense of the entire rest of the plan. Had I known that one sentence of one policy, of one goal, of one chapter of the entire comprehensive plan would be the only one quoted by so many people, I would never have voted for it. The UDO was in fact designed to be updated. The last update we'd made to it before 2019, I voted on in 2006. And then we didn't do anything about it. The process to update the GPP was supposed to be updated in 2013. It took a second administration to ramp it back up. It took the entire first term of the Hamilton administration just to get the UDO passed. Anyone who says that we haven't taken enough time to debate this sort of thing just hasn't been paying attention. They're paying attention now. I mean, what can we say? I have a lot more to say. I'm not sure how much time I have, but the last thing I think that's important to say.
You have about 30 seconds. I'm sorry.
Thank
Continue.
you. Yeah, that's fine. Is that, you know, I represent a district that the vast majority of whom are students. They are not transient. The census counts them where they lay their head 6 months out of the year prior to census day. They are counted as residents here. That's why all the districts are drawn the way they are. I urge you to look at the map of District 6 and see that was drawn before I took office 20 years ago.
Sorry, Councilmember Boland.
Yeah, I've got more to say, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. I'm looking at the screen. Has everyone had a chance to speak or comment? To respectfully acknowledge Council Member Sandberg's request as author of the last, I'll make comments now, my comments. This is, first of all, I just want to thank our community for coming out. Not only just one day, not 2 days, but many days. Back when there were opportunities from planning and transportation, when they would hold meetings that people participated. When the Plan Commission held meetings, people participated. So I am very, very thankful for that. And I hope that many of us can agree to disagree. That is also my hope, that we can disagree on an issue and still be civil as we move forward. 39 years ago, I lived in a core neighborhood. I'll just start with that. What I'll also say is that throughout this conversation this evening, I've heard Councilmember Sims being quoted, that I asked a colleague, if you were to move, where would you go? And again, I'm not in direct opposition to that. I just want it to be the full quote. When I asked that question, it had to do with the dearth of an inventory of housing in this town, including the missing middle, the workforce housing element, just a broader housing inventory. So the point of my question would be, I'm fortunate enough to own my home, but if I were to sell it right now, even though the prices have raised, there is nothing at the next level that I'm eligible for, that I could afford to go. And that is housing. You have a starter home, you sell it, you move to another. That's the elevation. That's how things move around. That's how housing in sort of these core neighborhoods become the affordable housing, because people move and then next families can do it. And if you are not able to move up, then that creates lack of housing. So that was what I meant by that comment.
President Sims, sorry, just a very minor interjection. I think you're off video. I don't know if that was intentional, so I just wanted to mention it.
Oh, unintentional, of course. It was never my intent. Thank you very much. Yeah, someone would have been mad at me for that too. Thank you. But what I would also say too is that when we're quoting, I've had a lot of conversations with neighborhood associations with other folks. How we got here to this point in our housing crisis has not had to do with duplexes in core neighborhoods. It's had to do with many other things and many other factors, and it's going to take many of those things in our toolbox to get out of that. We can talk about a lot of things. We could talk about redlining from an equity standpoint. We could talk about gentrification, which I personally witnessed in the neighborhood in which I live. So for when we're talking about a equity issue, an affordability issue, there are a lot of factors that have gotten us to that point. And adding duplexes, at least in my mind, how we would propose it a little later, is just one of the tools in our toolbox to help us try to mitigate this housing crisis that we have. Some of the things I've heard about some of our students, I just don't think is very helpful. And that's just all I'll say about that. So I only have about 10 seconds. We have a lot of tools. We have a lot of things that we need to work on to get out of this crisis. There's going to take more than duplexes, but this is just one of the tools that's in our toolbox, hopefully, to get there. Thank you. Councilmember Sandberg.
Thank you. We have heard from a lot of individuals all throughout this process. I want to, first of all, thank my fellow co-sponsors, the eloquence and the experience of Councilmember Rallo, and the dedication to his constituents in his district, Councilmember Smith. And I want to thank the very measured consideration of Councilmember Scambolari in District 2 for their support of Amendment 1 this evening. Whether this succeeds or not, and it looks at this point that it will not, I want to assure the public that I am listening to you. I am concerned about the health of our neighborhoods, and I will continue to be vigilant with that throughout the remainder of this process. I have nothing to add to the heartfelt appeals that we have heard over a number of years, actually, and certainly recently. It's not a numbers game for me. It is about the cogency of an argument. It is about who was the most compelling in stating their case for why they felt fearful, why they felt concerned, and why they feel that this body is perhaps not listening. I am listening, I will continue to listen, and I will always stand for the health of neighborhoods. Neighborhoods are important. They certainly are. In this community with a big university in its center, we have rental pressures that are unique. No one neighborhood is the same. They require a lot of careful consideration in how we protect the interests of the people who have invested in their homes here. This is a very, very serious matter. It will continue to be a serious matter. And with that, I will say that the compromise that I was willing to make in sponsoring Amendment 1 was allowing R4 to be the place where we experimented with this issue in upzoning. If that is not going to be the case, then again, I will encourage the public to stay engaged and to hold this body accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sandberg. Okay, Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, I just had a brief rebuttal I wanted to make. I'd only used about 2 minutes, 45 seconds of my time, if that's okay with the chair.
Proceed, please.
Yeah, just a quick note about language and sort of respecting diverse views and disagreements, which is that I also very much support the health of our neighborhoods, even though I'm opposed to this amendment, and I think their historic development character and the housing types that are there are important and play a vital role. I know people who live in missing middle housing forms who feel very unwelcome based on some language things right now. So please let's not co-opt the language of love for Bloomington or neighborhoods or anything like that. We all love Bloomington. We all love our neighborhoods. We all have values of sustainability, equity, inclusion. We have some disagreements on the nuances and details of policy. So just an appeal for that. Thank you.
Mr. President?
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Rollo.
May I make a brief rebuttal? It'll take about 15
Please.
seconds.
Please.
Referring to Councilmember Volin, there isn't one reference. There are 11 references that we placed in the supporting materials for Amendment 1 in the comp plan, which is at odds with the comp plan. And the land use map actually specifically directs us where to put this form. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Volin.
My name was invoked. I'd like to say a brief thing. But the proponents of Amendment 1 have been doing nothing but emphasizing that particular line, which was added by the very same proponents, Councilmembers Sturbaum and several of Kona activists back in 2017. This has been a long time campaign, and what we supported in the name of comity and unity back in 2017 when there were no stakes suddenly has been blown up out of all proportion. So I would respectfully disagree that that is the only line or the only concept important in the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we've all had final comments. Okay, do we have any final comments? Okay, seeing none. Are we ready for the question?
Call the question.
Am I? Yep.
Second.
Okay, thank you. It's been a motion.
Point of order. We now, normally the chair typically just asks if we're ready for the question and then moves to take a roll call on the amendment itself. But now we've had a motion to call the question and a second on that motion. So the motion on the table at the moment is a motion of whether or not we're going to take a vote on the question. Does that make sense? Unless Councilmember Rallo wanted to withdraw his motion and no one objects.
No, I'm sorry, that was customary at council. So
Exactly.
I'll withdraw my motion then. Please continue.
No, thank you for the correction, Councilmember Flaherty. You're absolutely right. But like some of my colleagues over the years, we've kind of gotten used to that. So I took a slight pause there. So I will say again, are we ready for the question? Seeing no more comments, will the clerk please call the roll on Amendment 1 of Ordinance 21-23? Clerk's office, Ms. Stoll. Did we lose her, Ms. Lacey?
There she is.
There she is. There she is.
I was being muted. I don't know what happened. Sorry. Councilmember Scambolery.
Yes.
Councilmember Sims.
No.
Councilmember Flaherty.
No.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
No.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Sandberg.
Yes.
Councilmember Rollo.
Yes.
Councilmember Volin.
No.
Councilmember Rosenberger.
No.
Thank you all. That amendment fails 4-5. I do have a question for a parliamentarian. Seeing that we are almost at the end of our allotted time without a further motion, and I'm not so sure how efficient would be to start Amendment 2. Is it proper to entertain a motion for, get the proper word, sorry, for recess for this evening to be continued tomorrow?
Yeah, at 7:30 p.m. tomorrow, I believe. Yes, such a motion would be in order and would take 2/3 vote of the council.
Yes, but before we go further, don't forget that we do have regular session business at 6:30, and then proceed with this, continue on at 7:30. So I will entertain a motion second to adjourn.
I move we recess the special session to meet again at 7:30 p.m. Tomorrow, Wednesday, May 5th.
Second.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Parliamentarian, will that require a roll call vote, or seeing no objections, and we just say see you tomorrow?
I think we should probably take a roll call vote on that one, President Sims.
I would agree with that.
Since we're overriding our.
Thank you. Would you please call the roll? Ms. Stoll.
Yes. Okay, Councilmember Sims.
Yes.
Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Sandberg.
Yes.
Councilmember Rollo.
Yes.
Councilmember Volin.
Yes.
Councilmember Rosenberger.
Yes.
And Councilmember Scambolery.
Yes.
All right, thank you all. Before we all get off screen, I just want to thank you again for your participation and just taking part in this. I think this was very difficult, but whether we agreed or didn't, I really appreciate your attention to democracy and how we take care of our business. Thank you all. Have a good night, and I will see you tomorrow. Thank you.